not helpful. And he's like, they all work. What you don't find is someone doing all of them, right? So you can find someone who's absolutely crushing it with raw land. And you can find someone who's absolutely crushing it with a certain type of apartment, and like, but you don't find someone who's trying to do everything. And again, that kind of goes back to that, steakhouse buffet. So for us at the Speaker Lab, like we're a steakhouse. We help speakers understand how to find and book gigs. Period, full stop. Like that's what we do. And so I think solving one specific problem for one specific audience for an extended period of time, I think those things have definitely helped us to gain and build momentum over time.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich show. I'm here with Andrew Biggs and our special guest today, Grant Baldwin from the Speaker Lab podcast and the Successful Speaker book. If you have not picked up the book, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, and Building Your Platform. Grant Baldwin, welcome to the Better Than Rich show, brother.
Hey, thanks, fellas. I appreciate you letting me hang out with you.
The pleasure's ours, man. We've been following you for quite some time, and as much as I would love to, let's do some small talk and like chit chat, talk about, your family, your daughter. We'll get into all that, but I want to get right into the meat. I devoured your book, The Successful Speaker, and you've grown such an incredible platform. The Speaker Lab podcast, the Successful Speaker book. I mean, your business, according to some of the episodes I've listened to, some of your interviews, you're talking an $8+ million business per month that you're running right now. You've impacted thousands and thousands of people who have earned 5, 6, 7 figures from stage using your Speak blueprint. Can you just walk us through the Speak process? What SPEK, what it stands for, what it means, what you do? That would be really awesome for our listeners just to dive right in.
Yeah. So I guess for a little bit of background and context here. So actually, way back in time, I went to Bible college. I was a youth pastor for a little while. And as a youth pastor, it gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And speaking was one of those things I really enjoyed. I wanted to do more of. I just wasn't sure, like, how do you find gigs and who hires speakers and what do you speak about? And like, how does this mysterious world work in terms of the speaking industry? And so at the time, this was, 16, 17, 18 years ago, there weren't any podcast, books, resources or anything. So I found myself just emailing other speakers, stalking other speakers, harassing other speakers, can I pick your brain type crap, and just like anything I could to just learn about how do you book gigs. And so learned a few things, started booking some gigs, and eventually got to a point where parlayed that into additional gigs, and got to a point where I was doing about 60, 70 paid speaking gigs a year. And I loved it. It was an absolute blast. And so then had a lot of people who were asking me those same questions of going like, hey, how do you do that? Like, how does that work? How do you find gigs? And what do you speak about? And I want to book gigs. How does that work? And so we started doing some coaching, some training, and that's really evolved into what we do today at the Speaker Lab. And so when people were asking us all the time, like, hey, how do you book speaking gigs? It's one of those things like, man, there's a lot of nuance that goes into it. And it does feel like this mysterious black box. And so a few years ago, we developed, Mike, what you alluded to, that Speak framework, the speaker success roadmap that just really lays out, here's exactly what you need to be doing, whether you are brand new, just getting started, don't know what you don't know, or you've been at this for a while. The Speak framework is the core and foundational piece of what it is that we teach to speakers at all layers or all levels of their speaking journey. So if you want, we can just I'll give you kind of a high level overview, and then we can kind of dig in wherever you want with that. But the Speak framework makes the acronym SPEAK, SPEAK. So the first part, S, is to select a problem to solve. Select a problem to solve. Now, this comes down to 2 key questions that every speaker has to answer. You got to be clear on number 1, who do you speak to? Number 2, what problem do you solve for that audience? Now, the mistake that speakers make here is that we tend to spread the net as far and wide as possible. And so, who do I speak to? I don't know. I speak to humans. I speak to people. My message is for everybody and anybody, right? And the same is true whenever it comes to, well, what do you speak about? Speakers are oftentimes like, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. It's like that just doesn't work. And so, and this isn't exclusive to just speakers. This is true for any type of business. So sometimes we think that the more broad, the more vague, the more generic we are, the more opportunities that we will have. And that's not at all what people are looking for. People are looking for a specialist, not a generalist. And so the more specific, the more narrow, the more focused you are, the easier it is to actually find and book gigs. So that's the first part of the process. If you get clear on that, everything else we're going to cover, it becomes a lot simpler. So S, select a problem to solve. Next part, P, is to prepare your talk, to get really, really clear on what is the solution that you are providing to the problem that you're going to be solving. Next part is E, establish yourself as the expert. So two key marketing assets that we teach speakers that you need to have. One is a website, and number two is a demo video. In this day and age, if you don't have a website, people won't take you seriously. So it's important to have a website. And number two, a demo video. Now, what exactly is that? It's think of it like a movie trailer, right? Before any of us would go see a movie, we want to see a trailer. And a trailer is basically they take a 2-hour movie, they're going to boil it down to 2 or 3 minutes and just give someone a taste, give someone a preview, give someone a sense of like, this is what this is about. And so for an event planner or decision maker, when they're hiring you, they're taking a risk and they are in the risk mitigation business, meaning before I'm going to give you money, before I'm going to put you up on stage, before I'm going to give you a microphone, I just need to have some sense of confidence that like you're a good fit, you're going to do a good job, you're going to be a win for our audience. So website and demo video help establish that expertise in the marketplace. Next step, A, is to acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part that people want to fast forward to. Man, just tell me how to book gigs, right? But you got to have these foundational pieces in place first. And from here, a mistake that sometimes speakers will make is going, I got my website, I got my video, and now I'm just going to sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. Mm-hmm. Like that just doesn't work. Like you got to have a process, a system to consistently reach out, identify, find gigs, contact them, follow up with them, and have a process to be able to do that. And then the last part of the process, K, know when to scale. Know when to scale, meaning people who are interested in speaking are also interested in coaching, consulting, doing a podcast, doing a course, doing a training. And like all those things are well and good. But we always remind speakers, like you can do all the things, but you can't do all the things at once. So something's going to come first, something's going to come last. You got to be clear about how speaking fits into the mix of what it is that you want to do. So it's a really long answer there, but that's kind of the overview of what we do and what we teach.
It's awesome. Yeah, I love how concise that is and how clear it is, Grant. So that thank you so much for that. And I was looking at one of your famous sayings: "Be a steakhouse, not a buffet."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, yeah, that applies to all businesses, right? It's like
totally.
If you go to the steakhouse, the steak can go anywhere from 30, 40, 50, $100, $500 or more, right? You go to a buffet, how much does that cost?
Mm-hmm.
10, $20. You got to really differentiate yourself and also bring special, have some sort of specialization. So I love that. I'm also thinking about like the listener who's maybe feels like they have a message on their heart. They want to make an impact. They feel like, oh man, ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to share a message with the world, but I'm scared or I'm not sure where to start or I have some limiting beliefs. Like, what would you say to that listener who's like, man, I just don't know if I have what it takes even? Like, what would you say there?
Yeah, good question. So I'll give you two thoughts here. One is kind of the first part of your question there is I've got this message, I got this thing that I'm passionate about, this thing that I want to help people with, or maybe I had some type of crazy story overcoming obstacles or whatever it may be. People are like, I want to share my story. I want to help other people, right? And that's all well and good, but there's an overlap between what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, what you're knowledgeable on, what you care about, and what is it that speakers are actually hired for in the marketplace. And the reality is, I don't say this to be mean or condescending in any way, is like you may have a crazy story, but nobody cares. Like a decision maker and an audience member, they're going like, yeah, that's crazy that happened to you. What does it have to do with me? What is that? How does that impact my life? How does that make some type of difference? And so just because like you had something that you overcame or accomplished doesn't mean the audience is like, yes, we would absolutely love to hear about all of your life achievements. Like nobody cares, right? And again, that's not a mean thing, but you just have to make sure that you're clear on how do you connect the dots between that and an audience who's trying to accomplish something similar, or trying to get where you're at. Mm-hmm. So make sure that you're clear on that. The second part of the question there is like those limiting beliefs of going like, who am I? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, why should anyone listen to me? And I felt that before. I felt that early on. I think oftentimes I still feel that today. And I think that oftentimes that's something that never quite, that imposter syndrome never quite goes away. You're always going to have those small, quiet voices in the back of your head. And sometimes maybe they're louder than other times. And so I think that one of the ways that you build some of that confidence is over time, you do the thing, right? And so how do you get better? How do you get more comfortable? How do you get more confident when you're podcasting? You podcast. How do you get better and more confident as a writer? You write. Whatever the thing is that you start to build some more confidence over time, knowing that, okay, I'm getting better at this. I'm improving at this. But I think it's important to remember any speaker that you look up to, you admire, you respect, it's easy to see where they are today and think, Tony Robbins, I can never be as good as Tony Robbins. Well, you're looking at Tony Robbins where he's 30, 40 years into the game, but you forget that like there was a time where he had done 0 gigs and then did his first gig. And he's done plenty of gigs that have gone really well and plenty of gigs that have sucked and everything in between. And so it's important just to remember that everybody starts from zero, starts from scratch, whether you want to be a speaker, an author, a writer, a podcaster, or whatever. You had a time where you guys had done 0 episodes and then you did the first episode. I had the same. Like I host a podcast and like I had done 0 episodes and then you do the first one, right? And so some of it just comes with time of doing the thing and knowing that like I'm an amateur, but I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to get better over time.
I love that. And I listened to you and Josh Shipp before I went into that very first speaking. I dedicated 300 hours of just dedicated speaking, volunteer in the classrooms inside of the school district. Because I remember hearing about like your 4-H and just like going to this little niche. My little niche was FBLA, yours was 4-H, and taking a lot of that to just as a playground, as a practice field. So can you just like kind of maybe take us back to Grant when you were starting, maybe in those 4-H experiences? I'd like to hear just some of the mess ups, like some of those mistakes that you kind of experienced and because I know what I experienced. I'd love to hear from you on some of that behind the scenes stuff that maybe I missed in the book.
Yeah, totally. And so, like I mentioned, I was a youth pastor for a little while. And so I had a lot of experience working with teenagers and students. I enjoyed working with that audience. And so when I was like, okay, I'm interested in doing more speaking, maybe doing this on a full-time level. Josh, that you alluded to, Josh Shipp was one of the guys who has been in the youth space for many, many years. And he was someone that I looked up to, admired, respected. When I go back to email and harassing, stalking a bunch of speakers, like he was definitely on that list and was very helpful and replied back and gave me some good advice. In fact, years and years ago, this is probably again like 15, 16 years ago, he had hosted a speaker training boot camp in Dallas. It's kind of the first first training that he had offered, and I went to that, and he and I connected there, and so it was super helpful just to see like, okay, here's someone who's doing this, and I found that. I found that this is still helpful today to look for people who are a step or two ahead of you in what you want to do, not light years ahead of you, but a step or two, because that was Josh for me, of feeling like, okay, like if he can do it, I can do it. Not that I'm great or he's, anything that is doing something that's unachievable, but it just gave me some sense of confidence that like, okay, there is a blueprint, there is a roadmap, there's a trail that someone else has paved here that I can follow to figure out as well. And so, yeah, Josh was definitely that for me. And so when I started reaching out to different events, you mentioned like the very first paid event that I did was this 4-H conference, and I 4-H, who for people who aren't familiar, is like a student leadership group in agricultural and farming, and like I know nothing about agricultural farming, any of that type of stuff. I was a city kid, and so I just didn't know squat about that. But so I was a little intimidated going in, like, man, if you guys are asking me to like teach you about strategies for milking cows, like I got nothing. But what I found was like those students who came from rural parts of where they're from, they're teenagers, and they're dealing with the same challenges and obstacles and limiting beliefs, that any other teenager is. And so, I did that first event in Missouri, which is where I'm from, and so I went and I spoke there. The gig went really, really well, and so basically I used that to try to leverage into other 4-H type of events. And so and this is still a strategy that works really, really well, is that you take a group like 4-H, or in your case, Mike, you mentioned FBLA. FBLA was another one I did a ton of work with. And a lot of those, especially on like a national association or a national organization, then it's broken down into, state or regional or district or local type of groups that are oftentimes maybe looking for a speaker. And again, like we touched on earlier, like event planners, decision makers are in the risk mitigation business. And so if I go speak at Missouri 4-H and it goes really, really well, and that Missouri 4-H director then, writes a letter of recommendation or gives me a recommendation to some other 4-H people. It's like, well, if Grant did a good job for them and their audience is essentially the same as my audience in a different state, then Grant would probably do a good job for us. And so that's really what I did, and was able to book a few other state things, and then maybe that would open the door to some type of FBLA thing, and then that kind of rolled into some other stuff. So and in fact, I remember you mentioned FBLA. I remember this is going to kind of connect a couple dots here, but one of an early event that I did was a referral from Josh. He was living in and still lives in California. I was living in Missouri. He was invited to do an event, a small little event in Oklahoma. And didn't make sense for him to do. They had a small little budget, a couple $100, and so he referred it to me. I go do the event, and the event goes really well. But I remember again, they just had a small budget of a couple $100, and that included my travel. So I was basically breaking even to go there. But I finished doing the gig. It went really well. And there's a lady who came up to me and introduced herself, and she said that her husband was actually the national director for FBLA. Mm. And she's like, "You did an awesome job. I'm going to tell him about you. He needs to hire you for some of the national conferences." And sure enough, a couple weeks later, he reached out and booked me for to do the closing keynote for a couple of their national conferences that fall. And that gets your foot in the door there, and then you do some other state conferences. And so it's like speaking is very much a momentum business. I've heard it said before that the more you speak, the more you speak, and doing one event in one Missouri 4-H event leads to some other 4-H events, and then doing this one random gig that was referred to me by Josh, and the right person in the audience sees it, and it leads to some national stuff, and that national thing leads to some other stuff, and it starts to compound and starts to roll. But I certainly understand that, especially in the beginning, it may feel like you're kind of pushing a boulder uphill, just trying to get some momentum there. But I think the speakers that make it work are the speakers that have that long-term perspective, that I'm not going to quit my job on Friday and become a full-time speaker by Monday. But having a long-term perspective and continually showing up and doing the work over time, you really start to see some significant progress.
And here's what's interesting is when you're talking to students on this, a lot of speakers think, I went through Dave Van Hoos's training. It's like have an offer at the end. So you're talking to students. So what the hell are you going to sell students at the end of a message?
Sure.
So what is is there an offer that you're positioning at the end of a message, or is the offer, let me serve, what is the call to action? Is there a call to action if you're speaking to this audience that doesn't really have much to give? So frankly, you're really speaking not only just to the students, but you're speaking to the facilitators of these students. And the call to action is essentially what I'm trying to say is, how do you measure a successful talk? A lot of people in the business industry will measure a successful talk by, we sold this much on the back end of that talk, versus we saw this much change in our audience. If you could speak to that, hopefully I'm doing justice on the question or the curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of even goes back to, when you're getting started in kind of this, we talk about that speak framework. Even one question to kind of ask is how does speaking fit into what it is that you're trying to accomplish? Okay. And let me give you some examples here. There's a client that we worked with at the Speak Lab, and their whole business was, they were doing some coaching and some training. And so what they would do is they would go speak, and they're speaking at 30, 40 events a year. And they were doing all of these for free as lead gen for their coaching business. Now their coaching business was driving, multiple six figures a year, but it was built upon speaking at the right type of events for free. So on paper, you're just well, what are you doing all this speaking for? You're speaking for free. You're losing money. What's the point of that? But that helped build the rest of their coaching business, right? So you have that type of model. You have, I have a really good friend who is doing more like a selling from stage, and he has some type of offer that he's making, and he absolutely kills it doing that. And that is super, super effective, right? When I was speaking, when I was doing 60, 70, events in the education space, and I was speaking a lot to teenagers or to educators or to colleges, there wasn't some formal offer of hey, buy this high ticket coaching program or training program, or bring me in to consult with you, as a 15-year-old. That wasn't a thing, So my sole purpose, my sole job was just book gigs, book gigs, book gigs, book gigs. There wasn't some offer, there wasn't something I was trying to sell, there wasn't something I was trying to pitch. Wasn't trying to get in. I was just trying to like do gig, do gig, do gig. And so again, it's not that one's better or worse than the other, but you've got to kind of figure out for you how speaking fits in and makes sense. So there's speakers that I know today, they do 100 gigs a year and that's it. They don't want to do anything else. Some speakers that do 5 gigs a year and they use it as lead gen for coaching, or they use it to sell something else, or speaking is just a very small percentage of what they do. And here's the primary thing that they write books, and again, they all work, so it's really just determined by like, what do you want to do? And know that like that can evolve, but that can change over time. So the way that my business looks today is vastly different than the way that my business looked, 15 years ago. And so know that you have some flexibility there, but also recognize like you can't do all things for all people at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's one of the more interesting things about where you're at right now in this stage of your career, Grant, is like you are doing $8 million a month in your business. So
a year, not a month.
A year. Sorry. Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Either way, it's super impressive, right? So you're doing $8 million a year. So it's like you've scaled this company, right? Really on the backbone of your brand and these frameworks. I'm curious if we were to go like general business lessons that you've learned in scaling this business. What are some of the general business philosophies that you'd love to kind of impart to people here? What your last piece of the framework is know when to scale, and it's also how to scale, right? And so teach us a little bit about what you've learned scaling a company to $8 billion.
Yeah, good question. There's a few things that come to mind. One is doing the same thing for the same audience for an extended period of time. Okay, one mistake that I see entrepreneurs make is it's just easy to get distracted by shiny objects, and we just kind of bounce from thing to thing to thing. So there are entrepreneurs that probably we all know of who, one day they're doing speaker training, and another day they're teaching how to do TikTok, and another day they're teaching Pinterest marketing, and the next day they're doing, creating products to sell via Amazon, and then they're doing real estate, and you're just like, what are they? It's like the flavor of the week thing, and it's just kind of like you can't really get any traction or momentum just like bouncing from thing to thing to thing. And so I think one thing that has helped us is I've personally been in the speaking industry for 16, 17 years. I've, with the Speaker Lab, we started the company 6, 7 years ago or so, and we've done pretty much the exact same thing the entire time. So there should never be a question of like, what's Grant up to these days? Nope, he's doing the same thing for an extended period of time, right? And so just I think that the longevity and the consistency of that and just showing up time and time and time again makes a big difference. Another thing that I think has helped is, again, solving one specific problem for one specific audience. So the same advice we would give to speakers is the same thing that we're doing today. So I'll give an example. Like, there are no shortage of opportunities of other things that we could do. Meaning like people who are interested in speaking are also typically interested in writing a book or coaching or consulting or doing a podcast or doing a lot of other things. And I've got experience with some of those. Those are some of those things that I've done. I've self-published a book. I've traditionally published a book. Those are things that we could talk some about. But I just know like, okay, the more we start to do some of these other things, the more distracted we are, and the more we start spinning all these other plates, and it's hard to make progress with any of them. And so I think within our business, I think we've done a good job of just continually saying no. Like those are all good things. All those things could work. And an analogy, an example I'd like to share is I remember several years ago that I was interested in real estate investing, just personally, and wanted to do something with real estate investing. And so there's a friend of mine who was doing a ton of real estate investing and just a wizard whenever it comes to this stuff. And so I remember asking him, I said, okay, you have all these different types of real estate investing. You have single family homes and multifamily homes and apartments and commercial and raw land and Airbnb and on the list goes. I said, which one is best? And he said, yes. And I was like, what does that mean? That's not helpful. And he's like, they all work. What you don't find is someone doing all of them, right? So you can find someone who's absolutely crushing it with raw land, and you can find someone who's absolutely crushing it with a certain type of apartment, and like, but you don't find someone who's trying to do everything. And again, that kind of goes back to that, steakhouse buffet. So for us at the Speaker Lounge, like, we're a steakhouse. We help speakers understand how to find and book gigs. Period. Full stop. Like, that's what we do. And so I think solving one specific problem for one specific audience for an extended period of time, I think those things have definitely helped us to gain and build momentum over time.
And when you said we and us a few different times, I am very curious on the infrastructure of who the we and the us, like who are the who's inside your business, like what's involved in your org chart, and because you went from a solopreneur speaking 70 times a year to a we and an us business. Who are those who's? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we've got let's see here. We got around 30 to 35 people right now on the team, low 30s. And it's a mix of different roles. So we've got, sales team and marketing and operations and coaches and customer support. So it's kind of a variety of different roles there. And again, I think that's a good example, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier of speakers who are going from, I have 0 gigs. I'm trying to go to my first gig, right? Well, there's a time where I had 0 employees, and now I have, 30 something employees. And like, again, that doesn't just happen. That's not just you flip a switch and all of a sudden you have all these people, So that's, again, a progression over the course of 6-7 years of, you have 0 employees. And then you hire the first very, very part-time contractor and very first, very, very part-time freelancer. And it's like, hey, can you just work for like, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $10 if you can help me this month. I'll buy you a Subway sandwich, just a 6-inch though. I can't afford a 12. and like, you're just trying to do whatever you can just to make it work early on. And then you start to get a little momentum and start to, okay, I'm slammed and this other person's slammed. So, maybe we can hire another like super part-time contractor or freelancer. Right. And so it's kind of, I think it evolves over time. The other thing I was going to say as far as like, what has helped growth is, I think there is so much truth to the expression of hire good people and get out of the way. And so that has been a huge part of our growth is we've hired like really, really great people, set them up for success, incentivize them in terms of comp structure, but also provided a great culture where they can thrive and they can be successful. And so we've been really intentional to create that type of company and that type of culture where you're not just doing a job, but you're a part of something that's bigger than yourself. It's a great company culture that you want to be a part of, that that you're making a difference, that that the team around you cares, that you're working with other high caliber, high capacity people. That has really made a big difference where I don't micromanage people. I don't want to micromanage people. I don't want to babysit people. And I know that if the whole company is dependent on me, then there's a bottleneck there. There's just a limit, a cap, a ceiling to what we can grow to. And so I know one of the best things that I can personally do as the founder, as the CEO, in order for us to continue to grow is just to get out of the way and really allow people to do what they do well versus just trying to babysit and micromanage them.
I love that. And I mean, with the way you've scaled the business, with doing all the speaking gigs that you run your podcast, you write books, you also have a family, right? And so, one of the things you mentioned was building a business that supports your life, right? Not the other way around. And so I'm curious to get a little bit more on the personal side. How do you structure your business and make sure that it doesn't invade in your personal life, or that sometimes does that fail, or how does that process look like for somebody who wants to scale the business or maybe has scaled their business but at the expense of their personal life? How have you navigated that more gracefully?
Yeah, good question. So for context, I'm married to my high school sweetheart. When we started dating, I was 15, she was 17. So married myself a cougar. And we've been together for 25 years now. Been married for 20 years. We've got 3 beautiful daughters. So it's me and a house full of women. It's the absolute best. And so one, I think kind of like guiding principle for me personally is I really believe that who you are is more important than what you do. Who you are is more important than what you do. Meaning, if I'm a great speaker, if I'm a great entrepreneur, if I'm a great podcaster, if I'm a great business owner, if I'm a great fill in the blank, but I'm dropping the ball as a husband, as a dad, as a son, as a a crappy friend, if I'm a shell of a human being, I'm doing it wrong. And so the most important roles in my world are being a good husband and being a good dad. I got one shot at those things. And so those are the things that are big, big priorities. Now, again, those are the things that, that sounds nice. That sounds fluffy. It sounds really, really pretty and cute on a podcast. But how do you actually live that out? But I think even before getting to living that out, like, again, it's one thing to say, it's another thing to be like, no, but you actually believe that, like, to the core of like who you are. And so that helps then inform and determine a lot about, decisions that you make. And so there are people I know that have like, I will build my business at all costs, and regardless of what happens to family or relationships or whatever, it's just like, that's just not worth it. Like it. And so I really want to make sure that I've got my priorities legitimately straight, and that my decision making, reflects that. So I'll give you one example. From the beginning, we've always been a virtual company, and in large part because I want to be home. Like I want to be around my family, and so I work from home. My wife homeschools our girls, and so we on one hand, like we're all together all the time, and on the negative side, like we're all together all the time, right? So we can step on each other's toes from time to time, but just that I get a lot of time with my family, a lot of intentionality with that. We take a lot of trips and experiences, and just are intentional about spending time together. I'm super intentional on my relationship with my wife, and so her and I are a couple things that we do. We do a weekly date. I got back from a trip late yesterday afternoon, and her and I went out for a quick date last night just to run a couple quick errands, right? Just to get some quality time, just to kind of catch up, just the two of us. We'll go on a date this weekend, and just the two of us, just to get away from the kids. We do a couple of trips each year, just the two of us, just to get that time together. And so I remind my daughters all the time, like that one of the best ways that I can be a good dad is to be a good husband, is to really love their mom, and make sure that the girls know that I love their mom. So those things have been, especially helpful in terms of just, again, intentionality. Now, again, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. And that doesn't mean that there are times where like things from a schedule wise are out of whack. One question is just kind of a litmus test that I like to ask is when things are really busy or things are kind of overwhelming, I like to think through, is this a season or is this the way it is? Is this a season or is this the way it is? Meaning, life in general, business always has seasons, and there are seasons that are just busier than others. So if you're in retail, for example, the holidays are just busy. It's just busier than other times. If you are an accountant, tax time, April, it's just busy, right? And now it's important that you look at it and just kind of analyze, like, okay, is it always like this, or is this just a season? Because if it's just a season, I can ride that out. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hang with me for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to be back to normal. But if it's just like I'm always slammed or I'm always underwater and I don't see any end in sight, like that's not good. That's not healthy. And so look and just kind of analyze and reflect on, is this a season or is this the way that it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I was just gonna say, I mean, to prioritize that much time with your wife and like be able to even take trips away from like a private trip, that seems like what some people do like once a decade, right? You're doing it a couple times a year. I just think that that's so cool. So I just wanted to double click on that, because I think so often in a relationship, it's like you kind of want the kids around, and it kind of keeps you busy, and it kind of distracts you from maybe not, having a great relationship with your spouse. And there's always somewhere to go, somewhere to be. Making sure the kids are taken care of, and just that private time with your wife, whether it's date night or taking a trip.
Yeah, and
so
like
cool.
Two quick thoughts on that one. Like as far as like the trips go, is there are times where like my girls are like, wait a minute, you and mom are going on a trip. Like, why don't we get to go? I was like, because eventually you're gonna move out, and I need mom to still like me. So.
Right.
I want to make sure that we maintain that relationship. But then also, I think, again, going back to what I was talking about, of one of the best ways I can be a good dad to them is being a good husband to their mother, and just making sure that I'm loving her. And so, and also recognizing that, like, I love my daughters, I adore my girls, but my first priority is to my wife. And so I've told the girls, jokingly and lovingly, of just like, I love all of you, but I love mom the most, and letting them know that like, again, like I adore mom. I love mom. I'm crazy about mom. And so that's why, her and I are going to do, some trips. And also just like why I want us to be able to demonstrate a great marriage to our girls. So my wife and I, both of our parents split up when we were growing up. And so, we didn't, unfortunately didn't have great examples of like, dang, like those people still really like each other after a long time. And so I want us to be that to our children. There's a guy that I know who recently got married, and his parents have a great marriage, and he said something at the wedding to the effect of, part of what made me excited about getting married is I saw how good could be because of my parents' example, right? And I want to be that for our girls, and so I think that hopefully we've done that and can continue to do that in the future.
Yeah, you struck a few curiosities for me, Grant, because you created these boundaries essentially around your relationship, working from home, like separation between business, and family. You created boundaries between your girls and your wife with Sheila, and it's like where my two-part question is, number one is, at what point were you like, I got to create these boundaries because I don't have them already kind of crafted, and I saw there was like some pain and consequences, and that's maybe I'm assuming that's why the boundaries are put in place. And or part two, if you didn't see it being demonstrated from your parents, like where did you witness this could exist? Like I could create these boundaries in my life, and I could create freedoms and travel and business success and all these wins. Like if it wasn't demonstrated by your parents, where did you experience it and see it's possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. There have been there's been a few couples that either I know personally or have watched at a distance that seem like they've had a good marriage, and they've just been super intentional on their marriage and their relationship. I don't know if it was probably partly that because my wife and I came from families that split up, that were like, okay, we don't want to experience that selfishly for ourselves, and we don't want to put our kids through that, having been a kid of that, and it just sucks. And so going, okay, we don't want to experience that. We don't want our kids to experience that. So what do we need to do to create the best possible marriage? So I think there's just been some intentionality around that. I think I think one thing that we have just tried to do all along is like we really value just having intentionality in life, and having an intentional direction. And so I mean, I really believe like, and we tell our girls this, that life can be whatever you want it to be, but like you're responsible for making it happen. And so don't play, the victim card for, what life is or what life isn't, cause like ultimately it's in your hands. And so, when I look at, our life together, like we have a great life. We have a successful business, we have a successful marriage, we have great kids. My wife homeschools the girls. We take a lot of trips. We have good relationships. We're checking a lot of boxes in life, and I think that we have a really great setup. But it's not because like, I don't know, man. It's not because like we won the lotto, or because we made this one decision and that changed everything. It's just like, no, like day after day after day, like we have to keep showing up. If I stop being a good husband today, like things start to fall apart. If I check out on my kids, like I don't have a good relationship with them. If I tune out of the business, like the business starts to struggle, like, so I think just having an intentionality with it. And sometimes that means making decisions counter to what, you feel like is expected of you. Okay. So for example, when like I mentioned, I went to Bible college, was a youth pastor for a little while, and then I decided like I want to be a speaker, and being a speaker wasn't one of those things like I saw on the job menu when I went to college. Here I was going like, okay, I want to do something that's kind of different than what I went to school for. I remember when I left this job as a youth pastor. I talk about this a lot in the book, that my wife was pregnant with our first child, and she was like 4 or 5 months pregnant, and I didn't have like some other career lined up or some business I was going to. And I remember my mom telling us like a couple of years ago, she was like, I legitimately thought you were going to have to move in with me. And like, what are you guys thinking here? Whenever we decided to homeschool our daughters, that was something that, again, we started 10, 11 years ago or so. And so at the time there wasn't a ton of people that were homeschooling. We didn't know a ton of people. We knew it was going to be, I had lunch with someone a couple of days ago and they were asking about homeschool. And I said, it's a lot of work, because I was like, man, if all of our kids were in school right now, then my wife and I we could go on a lunch date every day. We could hang out together, right? But like the kids are here all the time. And so it requires a lot more work and it requires a lot more effort. Whenever one of the girls is they're stuck on some math problem, they get frustrated, right? It's not like, well, that's the teacher at school's problem, right? It's like, no, like we got to help push through this and then we got to help figure this out. And so there's certainly parts where it's like, it requires more effort. It requires more work. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. And so I think just, we've always been really, really intentional about what kind of life do we want to have? One of the quick examples, like we really enjoy travel. Like we take a lot of trips each year and they're not like, crazy, extravagant, extraordinary trips or anything, but like just travel has always been important to us. And so we prioritize that. Whereas we may not spend money on other things, but like, okay, we really want to do some cool trips and experiences, things that we're going to remember as a family. And it's just something we've prioritized. So we've built life that way rather than just going like, oh, it'd be cool to travel someday. Or, I wish we had more freedom. Or I wish I could start a business. Or I wish we could home. And it's like, you can do any of those things, but you got to decide and then figure out like, what's the thing that what are the steps that you need to take in order to get there. And so I think we are, I think today we reap a lot of the benefits of decisions that we've made years ago and have continued to make those decisions to, have a great life today.
Yeah, one of the common themes I'm picking up from you, Grant, is just like things don't happen overnight. You got to put in the work. You got to stay consistent with your message. If you're going to be a speaker, you're going to make a difference in the world and make an impact. You got to show up as a great husband. You got to show up as a great father every single day, right? And you're reaping the rewards of decisions that you've been making for the last decade or 2 decades. And so, if you're listening to this and you're just getting started, start today, start now, right? Start living intentionally. I'm curious about, there's a lot of parents who watch the show. Homeschooling, I'm sensing that a lot more people are picking up on this trend. I'm curious, from your perspective, why did you decide to go that route? And yeah, what's that really about for you and your family, and what's it been like?
Yeah, it was something that we were always kind of intrigued by. And again, like if we go back, 10 plus years ago or so, we didn't really know anyone who was homeschooling. There's kind of there's probably some truth to the stereotype of like anybody that we knew that was homeschooling. You're like, I don't know if I want my kids to turn out like that, So, so there's kind of like, all right, how can we do this or do this well? And so, and ultimately, it was really a decision in large part for my wife. So our oldest daughter did kindergarten and first grade in public school. We had a great experience. We were, like I mentioned, we like to travel, and so we wanted to, we really value autonomy, freedom, flexibility. And so when your life is just dictated by the school calendar, for many, many, many years, like, boy, that just sucks. And so we're like, okay, if we are going to homeschool, what does that even look like? What are the requirements of that? And because I was at the time, I was speaking full time, I was on the road a lot. It was really like, okay, and my wife would have to be the one that owns this and kind of leads this and drives this. And so that's been the case, from the beginning. So she, when I talk about we homeschool, like it's her, she's doing 99% of it. And I'm the awkward PE teacher who just wants to make out with the principal. And, we kind of know our roles with that and have made it work. But a big reason is like the freedom, the flexibility, the autonomy, and in a couple ways. So, for example, we're recording this late September when the rest of the world is in school. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we spent a week and a half in Hawaii, and so we don't do a lot of travel during the summer when everybody else travels. We wait till everybody goes to school, and then we're like, all right, we out. And so, that's when we try to have some more freedom and flexibility. When we have, we've done some trips with a couple of friends and neighbors and whose kids are in school, and like, okay, we've got this, 3-day fall break window, or, here's where football practice starts and this is when this thing ends. And so we can do it this day or this day. And I'm just like, golly, like that sucks. Like, it's helpful to have a lot more like kind of freedom and flexibility of when, where, how, we're going to do life. So that's one thing. Another thing I think that's been valuable is, I've been self-employed for about 17 years now. And so, I really, I would love for my girls to do something entrepreneurial. If they don't, that's not the end of the world at all. But as an entrepreneur, like you get to kind of decide the rules of the game. And so I think they've seen me have a lot of freedom, flexibility, and autonomy with life. And when dad works, when doesn't work, and I still I treat this very much like, I show up early, I get my work done. We tell the girls all the time, like, work comes before play, and so I got to get some stuff done before we can play. But I've got the flexibility with that. And so I remember early on, this was like one of the first years that my wife was homeschooling the girls, and our two older daughters said, "Hey, if we do tomorrow's work today, does that mean we can play more tomorrow?" We're like, "Yes," because like that's the way it is, and for me in life, right? And so this idea of you go to school from 9 to 3 or 8 to 3 or whatever for Monday through Friday for 13 years of life, just because that's the way it's always been done. And the same thing with work is just like, I got my 9 to 5 Monday through Friday for the next 50 years. Like, just, I mean, that's what you want to do. That's fine. No shame in that. But if you're going like, there's got to be a better way, then like, what are the decisions that you need to make that take you toward, that doing something differently or better? So, yeah, again, it's a lot of work, but I also think that the benefits from a family standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from a freedom, flexibility standpoint, are really, really valuable.
Yeah, and selfishly, I appreciate Andrew asking these questions about the homeschool, and because I have a big passion on this. We had Ben Pekulski on the show, and we asked him some of these questions because he also homeschooled his kids. And my wife has concerns about what you said about the awkwardness of these kids. If they're like raised, the stereotypes and stigmas, and then we've also found like some community led homeschool programs and stuff like that. Like, is it strictly Sheila running the show like at home, or do you have like community led activities with the parents, and there's other involvement, there's other people that teach certain subjects? Like, selfishly for myself, I'm just more curious to kind of peel back the curtain, because we have a 21-month-old, so we're not there yet, but I know for sure it's the direction I want to go.
Yeah. So there are different, like, there's just kind of different hybrid models that you can do, and different, like cohorts or stuff that you can be a part of. We've tried that a little bit. It's kind of been hit and miss. And so we're not currently doing any of that. There's a lot of good homeschool resources, and they're all, online based. And so, a lot of times what my wife does is kind of going into the year, she's looking at, what are the requirements, but then also what are some of the extracurricular topics that, one of the girls may be interested in. And so, and then see like what kind of training courses, homeschool or otherwise, are available or out there. And so, a lot of it can kind of be, self-led, so like our oldest, she's 16, and she, there's kind of the core stuff that she's got to do, but there's also like, she's really been into graphic design. And so we've done a couple different like graphic design programs that like she wouldn't be able to get at a, typically at a traditional high school type of setting. There's also, again, as a side note, you think about like when we were all in school and like how much time is just kind of wasted,
so much time. It's wild.
If a teacher's got, 20 or 30 kids in a class there, they got to make sure all 20 or 30 are getting the concept, so if you pick it up in the first few minutes and you finish your homework or worksheet or whatever, like you're kind of sitting around for the rest of the class, and so the personalized, the one-on-one, like speeds it up tremendously. And so most days the girls are done by, late morning at that. And so it reduces so much of the filler time that, oftentimes may exist in a school setting. So yeah, I think it kind of, Mike, to your question, I think it as far as like what they are teaching, kind of depends on the year, depends on the kid. But there are like there's just a ton of resources available for that. One other thought would be, just as it relates to like the social element is, you do lose that. But you also, that doesn't mean like it's not possible to find another way. So we have to be more intentional about that. So having the girls involved in, other extracurricular activities, other type of programs, involved in a youth group at church. They've got several neighbor friends that they're involved with, that they hang out with all the time. And so, being intentional about those opportunities kind of help foster some different relationships and look for opportunities where they can connect with other kids. It's kind of interesting. Like you think about, the 12, 13 years of traditional schooling. And it's really the only time in life where you are really paired up socially, just with people that are your age. Right. And so, I have no clue how old either of you guys are, but like, if it was just like, oh man, we got to all be the same age in order for us to talk or interact, like that wouldn't work. So as adults, you're always interacting with people that are older than you and younger than you, and a lot of just like social situation, like being comfortable with talking to the waiter at a restaurant, or being comfortable with like asking a question for someone, or going to someone when you don't know what the answer is, or finding a way to get help, and you're at a Target and you're asking someone where some item is located. Like there's like these just little social situations that exist in life that are probably way more representative of what like normal day-to-day life is, versus sitting with 20 people who happen to have a birthday around the same time you did. So I think that there's just trade-offs there, but you can you just have to be more intentional about it.
It's awesome. It's great response. I appreciate that. And Graham, we'll before we head for the exits, we like to make sure that we ask all of our guests 3 questions. And again, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and helping this audience, just get exposed to some content that they haven't really heard much of on our show so far. I mean, you are the expert when it comes to getting paid to speak. And I'd like to ask you these 3 questions, and then I'd also like to make sure that our audience knows where to find out more information as well. So I'll ask the first one. I'll kick to you, Big. So Grant, what do you think the world needs most today?
What does the world need most? I think kind of on the theme of one thing we've covered and talked about here is to design a life on your terms and what you want that to look like. I think there's a lot of people who live their life and feel trapped and stuck in their life because that's what they expected. That's what felt like it was expected of them. And so the idea of doing something that's counter to that feels very, very difficult. So homeschooling is difficult. Starting a business is difficult. Being a speaker is difficult, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue it. And so I think, I'll give you a quick example. I've always thought it would be cool to learn how to fly a plane, and I have zero practical need to do that. I work from home. I'm not trying to travel around. Southwest jets can get me wherever I need to go, and so I just thought, man, that just like seems like a cool life experience. And so a couple months ago, I started taking flying lessons, just because. And like, there's, I'm not trying to be a commercial pilot or something. It's just like, that just seems kind of cool. And so there are a million reasons to not do that. But to be like, why not? Like, let's learn to fly a plane. And so literally about a month ago or so, was my first solo flight. I took off and I realized like there's nobody next to me, and I got to get this back on the ground in one piece and get it back down in one piece. And like, that was pretty cool. Like, I've done something that the majority of the population has never done. And so I think, again, just an intentionality about the kind of life that you want to live, and then make decisions that direction.
Mm-hmm. I love that. We're also curious, in addition to your books, what other books have transformed your lives? Like, what 1 to 3 books would you recommend everyone read?
Yeah, there's a good book I like called Rework. It's by the guys that started a software company called Basecamp, and it is from a business perspective, it's like just simple principles, ideas of kind of these counterintuitive ways that they run their business. And so a lot of that really resonated with me. So when we talk about doing things on your terms, that's kind of the same way I try to think about business today, and the decisions I make, for our company and for our team, is doing things that may be countercultural to, well, this is the way that you have to do it. This is the way that IBM does it, or this is the way that Amazon runs it. Like, well, good for them. Like, I get to design the rules of this game. And so, this is what makes sense for me. So Rework has some like really good just thoughts, principles around that.
Great. And final question, what does it mean to be better than rich?
Good question. Better than rich. So I had someone ask me the other day, this was a good friend. We'd had lunch, and he's like, Grant, do you think you're rich? And I was like, I don't know what to do with that one. And I think it kind of just depends how, the context, if you want to take that. But I mean, we all know that there are people that make a lot of money who just hate their life. And I don't think, though, that it's an either or. I think you can make money and have a great life. And I think I'm a decent example of that. That we make good money, but also like we have a great life. Like I wouldn't trade lives with anyone. I absolutely love my life. I love my family and love the business that we're doing. But again, that's all like super super intentional, and that's over an extended period of time. And that's not just I'm gonna wake up and make that decision and turn things around tomorrow. Like you got to continue to make decisions that move that direction. So. Yeah, I think it's way more than being better than rich is way more than what your bank account shows or doesn't show.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Grant. And Grant, I've been following you for quite some time, and I would love for all of our listeners, all of the communities that we're a part of, to be able to follow you as well. Where could they learn more about you, the Speaker Lab, just being able to work with your team of 30 plus people, be able part of your mission that you're on right now, learn from you? Where could they find more?
Yeah. And so if you're listening to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. So I definitely encourage you to check out the Speaker Lab podcast. We've got over 400 episodes there on anything and everything related to speaking. So definitely check that out. Mike, you touched on the book earlier, The Successful Speaker, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, Building Your Platform. These are 2 of the copies that exist. So Mike's got one, I got the other one. So I think we got a few more out there. So go pick up your copy of the book. In fact, we're sending books for free to people. Just pay a couple bucks for shipping. So if you go to thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com, you can find a link there to get a free copy of the book. So yeah, everything else we do is at thespeakerlab.com. But happy to help and support however I can.
Wow. That's awesome, Grant. Thank you so much. I definitely did not get the free plus shipping offer. So that's awesome. Listeners, take advantage of that. I'll tell you, Grant, thank you so much again. Andrew, thank you for your time. And listener, thank you for your time. And assuming this episode helped you, it's your turn, listener. Help others, share it with a friend, subscribe to YouTube, leave a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. And as always, remember, leave today better than you found it. Till next time, take care.
What's up, guys? Biggs here. I hope you enjoyed that clip. If you did, go ahead and check out the other video that's being recommended on the screen right now. You can also subscribe to our channel. And then if you really are interested in what we do, go to automatedelegatesystemize.com to learn more about what we're up to. Thanks again.